Over the past few years, I've had the privilege of being updated regularly about what's been happening with unusual embalmer's clots. I'll warn you straight at the start that I'm going to be showing some real pictures. So if you are a bit squeamish, please look away. But it's important for us to reflect carefully on what is being seen. This is from a recent Twitter post with Richard Hirschman, who is an embalmer who's been speaking out since 2021. And this is what we are still seeing. These whitish clots that are very elastic, that are being pulled from many patients, are still occurring. This is another example of what he's recently taken out of a patient or person who had died. This is not normal. We have never quite seen anything like it. And part of the problem is that these white clots now seem to be in the category of being untouchable, meaning that in the background, there are serious scientists looking at this, but everyone is very wary because they understand the implications of speaking about it. For those people who don't understand or haven't been following it, they will think this is made up. Because the obvious question to ask is that if this was actually occurring, the scientific community would definitely have investigated. I'm telling you, it is occurring, and the scientific community is not investigating it. That is the biggest part of the problem. And I've come to the conclusion just recently, as I reflected on some of the conversations I've had behind the scenes, and I reflected on the fact that at least on 3 or 4 occasions over the past few years, when important and trajectories were reached with regards to science or evidence, and nothing seems to change, nothing happens. And when I heard in the background that there are people who are in relatively high positions in terms of health organizations who themselves can't even get this looked at, I now look at the history of what is happening, say, for instance, with the Epstein files. This is nowhere near as big, but even the Epstein files still can't be released. So, what this means is that we are sitting on a health issue that may not get the light of day for 10 or 20 years. The problem is what are the implications? Because if this is happening, and it doesn't matter if it's just a few, the truth is that it doesn't seem to be just a few. This is indicating that there are pathophysiology occurrences that are occurring in the body of people across the population that puts them at risk for this kind of pattern. I'm going to share with you a few thoughts. And the first one that I would say is to do with my concept of the COVID storm. And the COVID storm, to understand where I'm coming from with these unusual clots, is essentially saying that when you have prior immune priming, whether it's from an infection or vaccination, and you have a reinfection, this increases the possibility of a storm, new, different symptoms, different from the original infection. My best analogy for something like this is to do with the varicella zoster virus, chickenpox. When you get it first, you have a rash that's all over the body. When you have a reactivation from the same virus, you get shingles. If you didn't know it was the same virus, you would perceive that this is a completely different disease. This is the angle that I'm looking at with regards to this COVID storm. When I recently did a presentation and I was looking at the characteristics of these clots, I focused on the fact that they seem to be forming relatively quickly. And this is because I haven't seen any convincing evidence that a lot of people have very large clots in them. And so when they are occurring, this suggests that there is some kind of trigger in an environment that predisposes someone to making life threatening clots. Because The size of clots that Richard Hirschman are seeing are not compatible without causing severe disease or death. And so someone can't sit on it, in my view, for 6 months without having very severe symptoms. They would be very sick. And so when we see this, in my clinical estimation, this means that there is some kind of trigger that then causes it to occur. So here are some thoughts that I've got with regards to what I think is part of the issue. So follow me as I've put the slide together. The first thing is that the body has already been primed. And these are the people who have amyloid-like microclots. And this is what they're finding, that they're all amyloid. And this means that there is something happening on prior exposure. So the body is primed with these microclots. And a lot of people have them, much more than are thought. And they're oftentimes asymptomatic. My view is that it represents the immune system being on alert. Additionally, they are likely to have persistent spike-related activity. The two sides of this, they may have fragments of spike protein or antibodies targeting spike protein. One or both, or the combination, in my view, is extremely important. Additionally, they are unable to clear these fragments. This is why some people get it and others don't. The pieces get stuck inside immune cells, and this is what is driving part of the problem. And what I'm trying to do is put together a phenotype as to who is at risk, because this is what people are thinking. Is it me? Is it my family? Is it my mom? Is it my dad? Who is at risk? Without the studies, it's very difficult. And at the moment, this is an extrapolation, but I'm sharing with you the kind of thinking that needs to occur. This is the bit that, in my view, is absolutely critical. Now, when I talk about this, people don't quite understand. A new trigger occurs. Infection, this is usually a COVID infection or an inflammatory event. My instinct is that this trigger is going to be another COVID infection, leading us back to the COVID storm. Now, I have the advantage clinically that I am able to talk to people and understand disease trajectory. What I'm seeing consistently, and these are for people who have either milder forms of unusual health presentation, and for those who have very serious presentation, there is a pattern. And the pattern I've noticed is that people are oftentimes mildly unwell a few weeks before a major catastrophic event. They oftentimes have headache, fatigue. It feels different from normal, but they don't think it's a major thing because there are no other symptoms, because anybody can have headache or fatigue. So this is where we need the history. And what I wish that we could get from the families of people who have these embalmers clots is a detailed history. What exactly was occurring before they died? And I don't mean a few hours or a few days, I mean a few weeks before they died. That bit of information is extremely valuable. Now, there are some countries that do a lot of embalming, and the USA is one, for example. Not so much say in the UK, but the principle is that we need the public to start helping the investigation. And how you do that is by asking the embalmers if there were unusual clots. Now, you have to remember that there are quite a number of embalmers who refuse to acknowledge that these abnormal clots are occurring. I don't know how, but they're saying they're not seeing them. And then you have others who do. But the first question is to start to ask, did you see unusual fibrous clots? Now, once you start to see this history with regards to these fibrous clots, it then opens the door for us to try and understand exactly what was happening. And this is why I said we need the history, we need the detailed presentation to figure out who is getting these things. What is it that needs to happen for this to occur? Because, as I said, the detailed protein analysis, and we'll hear more about this in the near future, seems to be primarily amyloid that is around a lot of immune proteins, and this is just a mush of proteins. But nothing like this has ever really been seen before. And where my research had focused was that I was researched on the fact that hemoglobin was concentrated in these clots. And I don't mean red blood cells, I mean literally bits of hemoglobin and fibrinogen as well. But the hemoglobin really stood out because it should not be there. And when we looked at the data from the analysis, the hemoglobin subunit beta was one of the highest, 3 times higher than the alpha, which didn't make sense because normally they're 1 to 1. So there is something unusual happening around hemoglobin as well, which suggests to me that there is some degree of hemolysis in the formation of these clots. And this is why they don't get dissolved. When you combine the immune trigger with amyloid microclots, plus a collection of patterns or symptoms around what it then happens. This was my image at the time from the presentation. The hemoglobin breaks down and then gets stuck in these clots, which adds to their fibrous tensile characteristics. And it's in a ratio of about 3 to 1, alpha versus beta. So this is extremely unusual. We've never seen anything like this before, certainly not at the scale that has occurred. And this is where I think that we really need the research. All I'm doing now is giving you an insight. Here are the important points. In the next few months, there will be critical research, I think, that comes out that confirms these really unusual patterns. I think what the scientific community will do is say, okay, so what? It happens rarely. We don't know why. We don't care. That's how it will be pushed aside. The next thing that is going to happen, I hope, is that people keep asking questions. Embalmers keep sharing information. As long as you keep it in front of people, there's no way to get away from it. This is the huge challenge that we have in front of us. There is little appetite to study it. And the reality is that there is little appetite because one of the questions is linked to the elephant in the room. We don't know for certain. We can only speculate. But until the research is done to explain exactly why, some people will get it, and you would have to show that this is happening in other countries in the world where there haven't been elephantized as much, then you could make the argument. But at the moment, where they seem to be occurring, the kinds of people that they're occurring in suggests that there is a connection. Our job is to try and figure it out from a scientific point of view. That's not going to be easy when there is potential implications and liability, which is why nobody wants to touch it. So we have a long road ahead of us. This is still not easy. But at the end of the day, anyone who tells me that this is something that we can ignore, especially because it is still happening now, I think is flawed. As my final thought, here are the images. This is what is still happening. This was taken out from a patient within the past month or so. This is what it looks like. What is it? Why is it occurring? What is the history? Why does it form? Who is most at risk? And is there anything we can do to mitigate the risk? Those are the questions that we need to answer. If we don't answer them quickly, more and more people are going to be harmed. Thank you for listening. Hopefully, we'll have more information in the near future. And as I said, look out for a recent or upcoming presentation, Toxic Liver Disease Rising Across Every Age Group. This is again part of the scientific research, as we try and look for patterns to make sense of what is going on.